these are the values that underpin WAN-IFRA and signify the continued importance of showing our solidarity with those on the front lines, wherever they may be. And today's laureates exemplify these values manyfold. This year, we recognize a news organization that stands as a beacon of independence and a bulwark against authoritarianism, a paper of record that demonstrates its values daily across its pages through its support to young journalists and in its promotion of local news. A media house that faces down dozens upon dozens of lawsuits from government and its allies and counters regular efforts to undermine its integrity, and one that has established a foundation to ensure a future where its work goes far beyond its circulation. Your Majesty, fellow editors and journalists, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to announce that the 2020 Golden Pen of Freedom is awarded to Gazeta Wyborcza and the Gazeta Wyborcza Foundation of Poland. Gazeta Wyborcza is fiercely and rightly proud of its 33-year record of upholding the interests of its society. First published on the 8th of May, 1989, under the motto, "There is no freedom without solidarity," it initially came under heavy censorship, but it became a critical player in convincing the public to reject the country's communist leadership. It also became the first publication that was outside of government control. By the early 2000s, Wyborcza had become one of Poland's best-selling newspapers, and it has since consolidated this position as a journal of record that keeps a constant vigilance over Polish democracy. Today, as one of the few remaining independent news titles, Wyborcza finds itself under constant attack once again. A systematic effort by the ruling party to capture public service media has led the government and its allies to launch an onslaught of legal and financial pressures, targeting Gazeta Wyborcza in particular. Yet, despite the daily struggle to deliver independent journalism and reliable coverage, Wyborcza has chosen to go above and beyond through the establishment of a foundation, the Gazeta Wyborcza Foundation. Its work empowers women journalists and draws young people into the profession. It denounces neo-fascist organizations, fights disinformation, polarization, xenophobia, and supports local and regional media in the production of investigative journalism. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February this year, the Foundation has become an international focal point for the support and emergency assistance to our Ukrainian colleagues, providing a vital lifeline to ensure independent media continues to function amidst the chaos of war. This has entailed coordinating offers of support from around the world, distributing financial assistance, partnering with NGOs and media organizations, and planning for the eventual rebuilding of a devastated Ukrainian media industry. The Foundation and the paper even facilitated the delivery of 48 tons of newsprint, paid for through donations to our We the Media Fund from you, our members, and delivered to WAN-IFRA's Ukrainian Association to keep the presses rolling. Without Wyborcza, none of this would have been possible. This has been an immense effort, one that the entire Wyborcza family can be proud of, one that we can all be proud of, because it shows indisputably that by working together, we have the best chance to effect positive change. All of this has required leadership, purpose, and courage, and Gazeta Wyborcza and the Gazeta Wyborcza Foundation are showing us the way. They are showing us that there is indeed no freedom without solidarity. Now, I'd like to invite on stage to join us in doing the honors. Let me invite His Majesty King Felipe on stage, as well as the President of Aragon, Javier Lambon, the Minister of Justice, Pilar Llop, and of course my friend and colleague, President of WAN-IFRA, Fernando Diaz. Please join me on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to present to you our 2022 Golden Pen winners. Please join me in welcoming Piotr Stasinski, representing the editorial teams at Gazeta Wyborcza, and Joanna Krawczyk, President of the Board of the Gazeta Wyborcza Foundation.
Your Majesties, dear friends and colleagues, since the first issue of Gazeta Wyborcza, we have been guided by the motto, "There is no freedom without solidarity." Free media, which I defined as public good, exist to reliably inform their readers about social, cultural, political, and economic layers of our reality. However, the goal of any editorial office, in my opinion, should be also to give readers examples how to build a better world, and media should show solidarity through and through with their readers, with citizens, and also with their peers in need, as long as they are determined to fulfill the public mission of journalism. The Golden Pen Award, which I am proudly accepting today on behalf of the Gazeta Wyborcza Foundation, its supporters, its workers, its friends, proves that no freedom without solidarity motto is also close to the hearts of the WAN-IFRA crowd. We are thrilled and humbled by your recognition of our efforts. Thank you. The deteriorating condition of Polish democracy means that free media and civic engagement is needed now more than ever. This is why, together with the journalists and publishers of Gazeta Wyborcza, we created our foundation to address the threats independent media, civil society, and democracy in Poland and beyond face. Our foundation is young, only 3 years old. But with the great support of like-minded people and organizations, we have established 7 media support programs. We award dozens of investigative journalism grants and financed a number of important investigative scoops. We support independent local media because we believe that in the face of crisis of democracy and trust in the media, strengthening local news and exchanges is crucial. Since civil liberties and independent media are under fire almost everywhere, including in countries perceived as symbols of democracy, it is important to share experiences and inform as broadly as possible about the mechanism used by illiberal governments to undermine civil society. This is what we do on our English language website, News from Poland, and in our newsletter addressed to foreign public opinion. Our 3 years of operation also mean close cooperation with countless partners, media and civil society organizations from all over Europe. Thanks to that, we were able to organize ourselves quickly to provide emergency aid to Ukrainian media when Russian full-scale invasion started. Just a day later, our foundation, Bonnier News, the Swedish Media Publishers Association, Danske Medier, Finnish Media Federation, News Media Finland, and the Norwegian Media Business Association funded our Ukrainian Media Fund. We called media industry in Europe to unite and support it, and their response was outstanding. Thanks to it, we have been providing constant financial support to over 50 local Ukrainian editorial offices and sending trucks filled with technological and protective equipment necessary for those journalists who stayed in Ukraine to broadcast from the front. But we have not been alone in these actions. And from this stage, I would like to recognize the efforts of other media organizations which have been joining forces to give Ukraine their support. The FIX, Reporters Without Borders, IPI, WAN-IFRA, International Media Support, MDIF, JX Fund, Thomas Foundation, CIDA, INMA, Global Forum for Media Development, to name only a few. I thank you for your solidarity and help. But even more, I applaud our Ukrainian colleagues, brave journalists, editors, and publishers, and Ukrainian organizations assisting them. The Association of Independent Regional Publishers of Ukraine, National Union of Journalists in Ukraine, Ukrainian Media Business Association, Lviv Media Forum, Institute of Mass Information. I salute your resilience and I dedicate this award to you. Thanks to all these efforts, Ukrainian journalists can continue producing valuable content. In the case of our fund, it translates to 12 million Ukrainian readers being delivered daily news. But this is just the first step. It is time for a recovery plan for Ukrainian media. Our fund plans to start with financing the reconstruction of local media outlets, these backbones of regional communities, in collaboration with peers from local media from Poland and the Nordics. And of course, other countries are welcome to join. Neither of these initiatives would be possible without donors whose contributions are a huge expression of trust in us and are a particularly edifying expression of solidarity in the face of the galloping economic crisis. I find the work we have done together and what we plan together unprecedented. This is, I believe, the first time in the history of the media industry when so many media agents, competitors in a sense, come together to actually save others. I am proud of you. I am proud of us. This is how there is no freedom without solidarity looks in practice. The suppression of independent Russian, Belarusian, Turkish, Philippine media, capture of media in Hungary, violence against journalists in Mexico, Nigeria, Guatemala. The time to delude ourselves that these problems will disappear by themselves has passed forever. And I dare to say, against all odds, future still can be hopeful. And the source of my hope is you all gathered here in Zaragoza, whose everyday decisions prove that stand with Ukraine, stand with independent media in Hungary, Turkey, Poland, Myanmar, Hong Kong, the Philippines, is much more than just a hashtag on Twitter. Recently, we tend to say, be brave like Ukrainian journalists. So let's be brave in our decisions not to leave Ukrainian media alone. Let's not leave any independent media facing oppression alone. Thank you. And it's time for Piotr Stasiński.
Good afternoon. Certainly, I completely agree and join with what Joanna's just said. And solidarity with Ukrainian journalists, it's our focus and should be the one, especially in Poland, because we neighbor the country which is invaded and is destroyed. There is a Soviet joke about a man who was scattering leaflets in Red Square in Moscow. Police rushed and handcuffed him, a policeman took a bunch of leaflets, but they were blank sheets. He said, "Hey, you fool, nothing's written here. What is it for?" The man answered, "Why write anything? Why bother? Everybody knows everything." Well, leaflets must not be blank. And this is what journalism is all about, I believe. Gazeta Wyborcza is deeply honored by WAN-IFRA and the World Editors Forum's recognition and appreciation. I am speaking with great satisfaction on behalf of our entire team and Adam Michnik, our editor-in-chief since 1989. In 1989, as communist dictatorships in Central and Eastern Europe started falling, Gazeta Wyborcza was founded, the first and only independent daily newspaper published freely between the Elbe River and Vladivostok. Having its roots in the anti-communist opposition and solidarity movement, Gazeta Wyborcza became a crucial institution of Polish democracy. And it remains the more so today, since the current authoritarian government of the Law and Justice, PiS party, has either trampled or captured nearly all institutions which safeguard democracy and the rule of law: independent judiciary, equality under the law for all, women's and minorities' rights, separation of powers, and even honest elections. Nowadays, with new authoritarianisms on the rise, when freedom of expression is subject to suppression and ridicule, free media in our region, in Hungary, Slovenia, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland, Wyborcza included, are facing hardships comparable to the communist era, not comparable to the fate of Ukrainian journalists, of course. Let's evoke that Soviet joke again. Does everybody know everything? Really? No. Today it is not true. Everybody doesn't know everything. Worse, many do not want to know. It is famous news avoidance. Gazeta Wyborcza's mission is to oppose this devastating phenomenon, as difficult as it may be. We work to inform citizens, and we work for informed citizens who want to make sensible judgments and to elect officials wisely. Even if it is an uphill battle, we are convinced that it is not futile. What Gazeta Wyborcza and other free media in Poland have been fighting against are two things: the censorship by other means and the cancelling of public opinion. Since 2015, when the Law and Justice Party took power, Polish independent media have carried on the uneven struggle against oppression by the authorities. In the late 2015, the ruling party wasted no time in capturing all public service broadcasting media. State-controlled TVP and Polish radio then fired or forced all independent reporters and editors to resign, replacing them with loyalists not to be called journalists. Since then, TVP and Polish radio have been serving as tools of primitive regime propaganda, blatant lies and hatred against political opponents, and independent media, questioning women's rights, condemning LGBTQ people, attacking humane and lawful attitudes towards immigrants, like those recently pushed back on the Polish-Belarus border. The peace propaganda machine is also setting their constituents against the European Union and disgracing Germany in particular. Thus, the ruling party seems to be preparing eventual poll exit. All this amounts to a 24/7 propaganda army, nationalistic, right-wing populist, and staunchly Catholic, attacking any democratic institution that has yet been left independent, like the office of ombudsman or disloyal local governments. All those media shamelessly and constantly glorify PIS rule, law and justice rule. PIS and its allies have tried to silence, make behave, or subordinate free private media as well. Official agency and state-controlled companies have withdrawn most media, even public tender notices regarding EU funding and pandemic communication. Today, Gazeta Wyborcza is facing already around 100 lawsuits since 2015, many of them slaps, and we have to fight them fending off those attacks consuming enormous cost and time of our lawyers and journalists. Notorious was an attempt to refuse a broadcasting license for information channel TVN24, part of the TVN station owned by Discovery Corporation. They were using a bill forced through the parliament, and the story is not finished yet. The ruling party has also found another way, taking ownership. In the beginning of 2021, the biggest network of regional and local media, called Polska Press, was bought by Orlen, a state-controlled oil company. The seller was the German Verlagsgruppe Passau. Orlen Press took over 20 regional dailies, 120 weeklies, and 500 internet portals with more than 17 million profiled users. The whole management of Polska Press, editors, journalists, and other disobedient employees were replaced by regime loyalists. Thus, the regime obtained a powerful instrument to win future elections, particularly regional and local. All this leads to the censorship by other means, since the official censorship is prohibited by the Polish constitution. And how about the cancelling of public opinion? Government agencies and other peace-controlled institutions permanently break the access to public information law by not answering questions regarding public issues posed by free media. Any exposure of a scandal, an affair, or corruption is stubbornly ignored by peace public officials. The everyday experience of independent journalists is chasing officials in parliament corridors, staircases, or vestibules of public buildings while the latter hardly turn their heads. And if they say anything, it is ask a spokesperson, go to an official briefing. But official briefings are propaganda events, drowned in fake news, with questions interrupted, answers avoided, and insults thrown at reporters. So because public opinion is systematically ignored, the public opinion ceases to exist altogether. Scandals and abuses by officials have no consequences whatsoever. There is no accountability. Such a resignation as that of Boris Johnson for breaking COVID rules and lying about it, it is completely impossible under a peace regime in Poland. In recent years, Gazeta Wyborcza has carried out a highly successful digital transformation. Today, Wyborcza ranks 5th in the European countries among the newspapers in terms of digital subscriptions, with more than 290,000 of them purchased. I am omitting the British newspapers because of Brexit. They are not in the EU anymore. Currently, with the sharply rising price of newsprint, twofold, we, as all other newspapers, face even more dire straits than before. Losses of revenue in particular. Therefore, we need more assistance and investment by the publishing company instead of constant pressure on cost-cutting and austerity dictated by faulty and narrow-minded corporate logic. Our mission and our respected brand need to be preserved and expanded, not disregarded or reduced. The mission we are committed to is especially important now in our troubled country and in the increasingly troubled world, with especially Putin's invasion of Ukraine, worldwide assaults on democracy and journalists, and toxic political polarization everywhere. The Golden Pen of Freedom Award, which we were granted and humbly accept today, helps us carry on, helps us persevere. Thank you.
Congratulations, Piotr. Congratulations to Joanna and to Gazeta of Boger. Do you want to let your prize here, or shall I take it for you?
I take it myself.
Oh, yeah? Very good. And now a round of applause. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I think we should hurry up a little bit. I would like to introduce you to an expert in journalism safety. So please welcome on stage World Editors Forum Newsroom Safety Advisor, Javier Garza Ramos, who will lead our esteemed panelists through a short discussion about new limits on press freedom. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to welcome our panelists today, and really a privilege to be hosting this. Your Majesty, Fernando, Vincent, it's great to be back in person here, and really a joy to meet. It is a bit of deja vu. I had the privilege of moderating this panel in 2020 when we were supposed to be in Zaragoza, virtual one. Warren reminded us that Ginette Bedoya, at the time, we had a great panel with Ginette and with Maria Reza and John Montgomery. And so I should say that whenever the Congress is in Zaragoza and I moderate the press panel, one of the panelists goes on to win the Nobel Prize. So I wonder which one will be next year. There are so many dimensions to press freedom that the conversation just doesn't seem to end, so each one of these panels just really picks up on the last one. And for this year, we chose the topic of polarization and how it affects our journalistic work and what are the challenges that political polarization poses to journalism. I'm just going to introduce our panel very quickly. Joanna Krauchik, who we just heard from, a media development expert dedicated to building projects that have social impacts, and she's the head of news partnership in Gazeta Wyborska and presides the Gazeta Wyborska Foundation. Joan Chirwa is a journalist from Zambia with 18 years of experience, not only as a journalist, but also promoting press freedom. She founded the Zambia Free Press Initiative and has headed two of the most important news organizations in Zambia, the online news website, The Mast, and the newspaper, The Post. Ritu Kaipur from India, a member of the World Editors Forum, is co-founder and managing editor of Quint Digital Media. It's one of the most important independent news sites in India. Also a broadcast founder of Network 18, and she pioneered citizen journalism in her country. And Marcelo Reg, a very familiar face in these gatherings, an executive at RBS, one of the largest media groups in Brazil, where he was the executive director of journalism and institutional vice president. Now retired from there, but not from the game. He is now a columnist for the daily Zero Hora and president of the Brazilian Newspaper Association. So thank you very much to everyone. And we'll quickly just begin the panel. As polarization cuts through and hardens political positions, probably causing the public to lose respect for facts and to entrench people in one's own information bubble. So polarization is also dangerous for journalists as the ethical dilemmas that it presents. So how do we deal with it? That is what we are going to explore with our panel, starting with Joanna. Please give us a sense of some of the ethical challenges that you faced recently as your environment becomes more polarized.
You know, I have a feeling that we know what polarization is very deeply. This is something that is probably not good to describe in details because, well, we all feel it. We are all kind of submerged in a polarized world. It is especially acute in those countries, those societies which are led or which are governed with illiberal democracy like Poland. Working in Gazeta Wyborcza means that you face polarization every day, means that you are the victim of polarization, political polarization, something my colleague Piotr mentioned in his speech, every day. What is of my interest, because I am a doer, not a thinker actually, is what can be done when you're a media outlet or civil society organization interested in media, what actually can be done to work with polarization, because I think that the state of the affair we have established. Now, what can be done with it? Probably you wanted to ask this as the second question, but I will answer it anyhow, because I actually know what to do with it. And something I would like to mention on this stage is the power of conversation. And of course, it's you probably think, yes, of course, conversation, and then, you know, how to do it in a newspaper or in a digital media. Well, involvement of your readers is the key, in my opinion. And I am so certain of it because we have tried it. We have tried it a few times. We are a part of a program, a community tool, which is called Europe Talks, which offers a very unique tool for media to engage their readers, but also readers of other media, which are in a completely different information bubbles. And through this tool, these people are paired and start discussing and talking. They do it online, they do it offline, and amazing things happen when they start doing it. So I've seen at least a few times people from polarized communities finding things they do have in common. And it was one of the most touching things I've seen in the past years. So, like I said, a short introduction to something that is actually working.
Ritu, what can you tell us about some of the ethical challenges that you have faced recently? Polarization sort of challenges our concept of balance and being fair to all positions, sometimes when we know that there are some positions that are blatantly false or dangerous, and so we cannot give them equal time. What do you think this plays out in daily journalism?
So in India, the immediate polarization right now is in the sort of the othering of Muslims in the country, which is a minority, putting out a narrative which is pushing towards a Hindu state, saying that Hindus are under threat from Muslims, which is completely nonsensical, actually. But it's also an environment where a large part of legacy media is actually now propaganda machines for the government. In that environment, what happens to independent news organizations like us, or we run the risk of, is to overcompensate the narrative for the community that is being targeted, and which is also important. It's work that needs to be done because the narrative against them is so hateful and so strong. But what happens is, and I think the important lesson for us, the ethical lesson here, is to look out for our own biases, to look out for falling into the trap of echo chambers, which, looking out for a narrative which is akin to what we think, because journalists, like Muslims, are being attacked in the country. So I'll give you a very quick example to illustrate this. About a year back, or less than a year back, a propagandist film was released on the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits, which are high caste Hindus, out of Kashmir because of Muslim attacks on them, which this happened in the late 80s, early 90s. And we actually found, we get a lot of readers saying you're always, you're only supporting Muslims, there's no narrative about Hindus, and you are leftist, the general trolling that happens. But this time we found that a lot of our sensible readers, balanced readers, were reaching out to us saying, why are you not covering what's, the exodus and the atrocities on Kashmiri Pandits? And I brought that up as a debate in the newsroom, and I had such a strong pushback from journalists in my newsroom saying, no, we will not pick that up, and that is not for us, they're getting enough propaganda from elsewhere. And to cut a long story short, I prevailed, and we actually 20 years later. And what we actually got was a very strong documentary on how unhappy the Kashmiri Pandits were with this government. So I think there's a constant need in newsrooms to look out for our own biases, to not fall into echo chambers, and not to actually unthinkingly contribute to the polarization.
Well, when you talk about how to engage the audiences, and sometimes that is very important, the way that how we educate the audience to sort of know that there is a common set of facts, and that news is not necessarily one side or the other. Joan, how do you think this affects the value of independent press? Because one of the effects of polarization is that we see whoever we cover, political leaders, economic actors, whatever, they can denounce independent, critical, solid journalism as simply fake news and convince people that they are fake news when it is actually very solid reporting. How do you think this affects the value of the independent press?
It's something that has slowly been eating into credibility of a number of media organizations. And I think how a number of them have found ground to continue to push and do what they have been doing is doing as much as possible not to deviate from the core values of journalism and also sticking to ethical conduct, which has been quite a major issue, and it's been at the center of discussion even in Zambia and a few other countries, I think, in south of Africa. I'll give you an example of one of the media organizations that we have, which has identified itself as an investigative newspaper, purely that, and they've been doing quite a lot of work. And like you mentioned, there are quite a number of times where they have gotten feedback from some of the people that have been written about, where they're trying to dispel that and say this is fake news. But what has helped them is to ensure that the work that they do is watertight and get as much information as possible, so they do not rush to publish a story. They make sure that everything else that they have has been well verified and it's factual. So I think the issue of maintaining, having to get the factual information and packaging it in a way that doesn't leave any loophole for somebody to dispute does some magic in this practice of journalism, because you get quite a lot of people that will come out in trying to protect their own, themselves from whatever it is that could have been exposed by most of the critical media. And some of them are quite influential, such that they may even go further to begin to see how they can hit back at that particular media organizations, where in the end you get police call-outs and some police summons and some lawsuits, for example, because they want to meet you in court and begin to try and find ways in which they can continuously discredit the news that you have been carrying out. So all in all, I think for me, really, it's an issue where we have to invest quite a lot in doing a lot of research and ensuring that we do as much verification as possible, so that the information that we pass out to the people that consume our news is credible enough.
Thanks. Marcelo, you've lived under the past few years with a government headed by a president who is not only hostile to the press, but also stokes that hostility in his followers, in the social media bubble that those followers have created. And then you have elections next week, so things must be burning very, very hot in Brazil. What has been your experience, if you can talk about, in this particular election, because it might be a good example? And also, how do you think we can be proactive in what can we propose from a place like this? You've been to many of these gatherings. How can we be proactive for news media to sort of take on this polarization?
Javier, it's sad to see that a country like Brazil felt in every freedom of the press ranking in the last few years, mainly due to the attacks, the hostility from the president and his supporters. And besides all the old stuff, old problems like killings, murders, one recently that has one of these tragic killings of journalists was the British journalist Don Phillips that was murdered in the Amazon region while he was reporting there last June. We also facing in Brazil, as I would say almost everywhere, the digital harassment boosted by instrumentalization of the social media in order to try to intimidate professional journalism. This happens largely in Brazil, in I would say a great divide. It's a huge polarization that's based in the spread of the dissemination of disinformation and the spread of the bubble rages. And the situation is so dramatic for the stability of the country, of the political system, for the economy, and not just in Brazil, I would say for the world, that we should start to talk, to debate, and formulate, and go into the direction of a global agreement against disinformation and to support ethical, independent, and professional journalism. Mirrored in the global agreement against the climate change, because the climate change threats the world physically, disinformation, enraged bubbles threat the world in terms of psychological and socially. So I doubt that we will have such a tragic horror that we see in Ukraine today if there was a strong and free press in Russia. At least it would be almost impossible to sustain a war like this and go into this absurdity that we are discussing the possibility of a nuclear war today if there was a strong and free press in Russia. And so this is the great challenge that we face ahead of us. We have to push United Nations to carry on this task of a global agreement against disinformation to support journalism.
Interesting that you mentioned climate change, because I think few issues have been more affected by disinformation than climate change. But that proposal, I think, is something that we can move forward. This is sort of like a very brief taste. Unfortunately, we have to keep this very, very short. But please take this roundtable, this panel, as a conversation starter to how can we keep developing on these ideas, on how do we fight disinformation, and how do we contribute to at least finding a common ground among our audiences so that polarization will not be exacerbated. I want to thank the panel, Joanna, and congratulations to Joanna and Piotr Ritu, Joan, and Marcelo for this brief overview. And thank you to WAN-IFRA.
Thank you so much. Limits of press freedom, it's enough to do. And we have key elections in Brazil this Sunday, right? We'll see. Damos la bienvenida ahora al presidente del Gobierno de Aragón, Javier Lambán Montañés. Bienvenido. Adelante.
Majestad, ministra, presidente de la Asociación Mundial de Editores, presidente de las Cortes de Aragón, delegada del Gobierno, alcalde de Zaragoza, autoridades, congresistas, queridas amigas, queridos amigos. Aragón celebra hoy por todo lo alto que en un momento crítico de la historia de Europa, la Asociación Mundial de Editores haya elegido Aragón para celebrar su 73º Congreso, algo que todos tenemos absolutamente claro que le debemos a ese gran aragonés que es Fernando de Yarza. Yo soy de los que estoy plenamente convencido de que el gran debate de nuestro tiempo, el debate político cuyo resultado final determinará el signo de nuestro futuro, no se libra ya en los tradicionales términos ideológicos entre la izquierda y la derecha. El combate ideológico, el combate institucional, el combate moral y de civilización que va a determinar el futuro es el que se libra entre quienes defendemos contra viento y marea la democracia liberal y los militantes de los nacionalismos y de los populismos que siempre, inevitablemente, propenden al autoritarismo. Una democracia, para respirar con plenitud, para estar sana, para ser vigorosa, requiere de políticos, requiere de buenas instituciones, pero requiere también, de manera absolutamente imprescindible, de unos medios de comunicación libres, independientes, de unos medios de comunicación a cuyo servicio trabajen profesionales de contrastada profesionalidad, de contrastada independencia, y eso es justamente lo que representan ustedes Ese es el espíritu que anima a esta asociación y es el espíritu que anima a este Congreso y es el espíritu que emana de las palabras que hemos oído aquí esta tarde. Es, por cierto, la batalla que se está librando en este momento en los campos de Ucrania y por lo que estamos tan pendientes de ellos y por lo que no les debemos regatear en ningún momento ni un ápice de ayuda. Señoras y señores, me imagino que muchos de ustedes visitan Aragón por primera vez. Pues bien, antes de saber que esta tierra y que esta ciudad es una tierra que ha tenido siempre vocación de universalidad. Los aragoneses somos gentes que desde hace siglos hemos tenido claro que nuestro hábitat natural es el mundo. De hecho, y dándoles una pincelada de nuestra historia, les diré que esta comunidad milenaria que es Aragón fue el germen de una de las formaciones políticas más fascinantes de la Edad Media europea, que en algún momento se llegó a enseñorear del Mediterráneo entero y verdadero. Y ese espíritu de hace 1000 años jamás lo hemos perdido. Ha pasado por avatares más o menos afortunados, pero hoy sigue plenamente vivo. Y de hecho están ustedes en un palacio de congresos que formó parte de la Exposición Universal que la ciudad de Zaragoza celebró en el año 2008, merced al impulso de un grandísimo político, el alcalde de la época, Juan Alberto Belloc. En la Expo, en aquel momento, Zaragoza declaró a los cuatro vientos, declaró al mundo entero que tenía capacidad, vocación, voluntad y resolución para ser una de las ciudades determinantes del futuro, no solo de Aragón y del Valle del Ebro, sino de España y, si me apuran, de Europa, lo cual es muy importante, en un momento en el que cada vez hay más gente que sabe, que dice que el siglo XXI va a ser, por encima del todo, el siglo de las ciudades. Y en ese siglo XXI, que ha de ser el siglo de las ciudades, Zaragoza tiene capacidad, vocación y resolución para ser un elemento absolutamente fundamental. Les hablaba de un espíritu internacional, de un espíritu absolutamente resuelto a andar por el mundo sin ningún tipo de complejo, sin ningún tipo de reticencia. Siempre ha habido hombres y mujeres que han representado a la perfección ese espíritu y ahora también los hay. Y les pongo como ejemplo al promotor fundamental de que el Congreso se esté celebrando aquí. Les pongo el ejemplo de Fernando de Yarza, un hombre que pertenece a una estirpe familiar de empresarios de éxito, pero que yo creo que si tuviera que elegir de entre todas sus actividades la que más le enorgullece es justamente la que se relaciona con el periodismo, la que se relaciona con la comunicación. De hecho, su familia fue fundadora de un periódico hace 137 años, Heraldo de Aragón, que ha sido durante todo ese tiempo una compañía absolutamente imprescindible de lo mejor de la historia de esta comunidad. Señoras y señores, se me ha dicho que sea breve y lo voy a ser, cumplo escrupulosamente con la máxima de Gracián y empiezo o termino por donde debería haber empezado, termino por darles a todos ustedes la bienvenida a Aragón. Esta tierra es un país, es una comunidad donde la libertad y donde los derechos respiraron, respiran y respirarán siempre con fuerza de gigante. Y además, Aragón es uno de los elementos constitutivos y constituyentes de esta gran nación que es España por encima de cualquier otro de esos elementos. Es más, Aragón es un instrumento al servicio de ese gran proyecto nacional que si entre todos no lo estropeamos, está destinado a ocupar un papel, un espacio y una función importantísima en el mundo que viene. Y para eso contamos con un actor de primera magnitud, que es Su Majestad el Rey don Felipe VI. Don Felipe VI representa lo mejor de la España actual. Don Felipe VI encarna a la perfección el espíritu de la Constitución. En sus palabras, en sus gestos y en sus actitudes nos vemos reflejados los españoles en lo mejor que tenemos de nosotros mismos. Y por eso, Majestad, cada vez que viene a Zaragoza nos alegramos, lo acompañamos y sobre todo le deseamos que siga viniendo muchas veces. Bienvenido y muchas gracias por estar aquí esta tarde tan importante para nosotros. Bueno, y tengo el honor y el privilegio de darle la palabra a mi buen amigo Fernando de Yarza.
Majestad, Presidente de la Comunidad Autónoma de Aragón, Ministra de Justicia, Presidente de las Cortes de Aragón, Delegada del Gobierno, Alcalde de la ciudad de Zaragoza, Presidente de la Asociación Española de Periódicos, Presidente de la Asociación Mundial de Directores, familia de WAN-IFRA, queridos amigos, Majestad, gracias de corazón por haber aceptado estar hoy con nosotros en el 73º Congreso Mundial de Periódicos y Editores WAN-IFRA, cuyas sesiones de trabajo empezaron esta mañana con el objetivo de seguir fortaleciendo la libertad de prensa y la independencia editorial en unos momentos realmente muy complejos en todo el planeta. Por eso, la presencia de Su Majestad es un acicate y un estímulo para todos los congresistas que aquí estamos, a fin de no ceder en ese esfuerzo de defender las libertades con firmeza, a través de los medios de comunicación. Muchas gracias, Majestad. Debemos felicitar a Joanna Kraski, presidenta de la Gazeta Wyborcza Foundation de Polonia, por haber sido premiada con el Golden Pen of Freedom, el reconocimiento más importante que se concede en el mundo periodístico. Nuestros galardonados simbolizan esos valores que defiende WAN-IFRA en el empeño irrenunciable de la libertad de información y la independencia de los medios. De Gaceta no solo resiste las presiones del poder político y económico, sino que ha forzado ese ejemplo de compromiso con las libertades tras la vergonzosa agresión bélica que Rusia está llevando contra Ucrania. Foundation está siendo fundamental en los esfuerzos humanitarios en favor del pueblo ucraniano, en el apoyo a los medios y periodistas de ese país, tanto a los que siguen dentro como a los que se han exiliado. Desde WAN-IFRA nos solidarizamos con Ucrania y mandamos también un mensaje de apoyo y cariño a esos sectores críticos de la prensa rusa que se están jugando literalmente la vida y su libertad por oponerse a esta injustificada invasión. Hace ya 3 años celebramos en Glasgow el último congreso presencial de la Asociación. Pocos meses después, la trágica pandemia que asoló el mundo y que tantas vidas ha costado nos obligó a suspender los siguientes, y en el 2022 los hemos logrado recuperar. Fue precisamente en Glasgow donde, después de muchos años peleando por ello y con el decidido apoyo de mi predecesor en el cargo, Michael Golden-Sulzberger del New York Times, al que tanto admiro y a quien considero mi maestro, conseguimos traer este congreso a España. Desde 1981, año en que la WAN se citó por última vez en Madrid, España ha protagonizado avances muy importantes y se ha convertido en una de las democracias modernas más importantes y vigorosas del mundo. Aragón, nuestra región, Zaragoza, su capital, son un espejo de la España actual. Por ese intenso orgullo que siento de ser español y aragonés, quería traer el Congreso a nuestras tierras y que ustedes sintieran durante unos días su amable acogida. Heraldo de Aragón, el periódico que ejerce de anfitrión y origen del grupo que presido, ENEO, cumplió el pasado 20 de septiembre, presidente, 127 años, nos ha dado 10 años más de edad, convirtiéndonos ya en un diario y en un grupo de proyección nacional. Estamos absolutamente comprometidos con el legado que hemos recibido. Por eso, cuando les veo aquí a todos ustedes presentes, llenando por completo este auditorio, no puedo dejar de pensar en lo orgullosa que estaría de todos nosotros mi abuela Pilar. Ella tenía solo 20 años cuando en 1940 murió su padre, que además ejercía como editor del periódico. España estaba rota por una terrible guerra civil y en esas difíciles circunstancias tuvo que hacerse cargo del Heraldo junto a su madre y su hermana. Gracias al esfuerzo y determinación de esas 3 valientes mujeres, hemos llegado hasta aquí con los mismos valores con los que nació nuestro diario en 1895, la defensa inequívoca de la libertad y la independencia editorial. Y así queremos seguir, con perseverancia y vocación de servicio. Me van a permitir que desde esta privilegiada tribuna y con el referente de aquellas aguerridas mujeres que me precedieron, rinda hoy un sentido homenaje a las miles de familias editoras que desde todos los rincones del planeta han comprometido su vida en defensa de la libertad de prensa y construir una sociedad mejor. España no ha sido ajena a este compromiso. Desde hace más de 40 años, nuestro país es una democracia avanzada y sólida, cuya forma política es la monarquía parlamentaria, hoy tan brillantemente representada por el rey Felipe VI y la reina Leticia. Su Majestad cumple con ejemplaridad y excelencia su deber constitucional de arbitraje y moderación de las instituciones y de máximo representante de España en las relaciones internacionales, con una conducta prudente y sensata, con su apuesta por la concordia cívica y su respeto a la pluralidad política y cultural de un país tan diverso como España. Sé muy bien, Majestad, porque así lo ha demostrado, que la libertad de información y la prensa solvente de calidad tienen en vuestra persona un apoyo decidido y sin fisuras. Y por eso, en mi condición de presidente de la Asociación Mundial de Periódicos y Editores de Noticias, que agrupa más de 18.000 publicaciones de 120 países, quiero reconocerle ese permanente respaldo al periodismo de calidad y reiterarle mi agradecimiento por su presencia en este Congreso, cuyo objetivo es defender la libertad de prensa como piedra angular del resto de los derechos ciudadanos. Quiero terminar mis palabras citando un premio Nobel de la querida y hermana Latinoamérica y darle la razón al gran García Márquez cuando afirmaba que ser periodista o editor, además de ser el oficio más bonito del mundo, consiste en tener el privilegio de cambiar algo todos los días. En ello estamos y no vamos a reblar, en el permanente y decidido compromiso con la libertad de prensa. Muchas gracias, Majestad. A continuación, para cerrar este acto, le pediría a Su Majestad que nos dirigiera unas palabras.
Presidente del Gobierno de Aragón, Ministra de Justicia, Presidente de las Cortes de Aragón, delegada del Gobierno en la Comunidad Autónoma de Aragón, alcalde de Zaragoza, presidente y miembros de la Asociación Mundial de Periódicos y Editores de Noticias, WAN-IFRA, presidente del Grupo ENEO y presidente también, me alegro de verte, presidente de la Asociación Española de Medios y del Grupo Yolí, queridos premiados, autoridades, señoras y señores, miembros de la prensa y de los editores de muchos países que nos visitan. Bienvenidos. Les diré unas palabras en inglés y luego también en español. As we open this World Media Congress, I would like to join the words of welcome to all who have traveled from far and visit Spain for this very important event here in Zaragoza, the lovely capital of Aragon. I won't indulge in talking about the excellencies of our country and this region and city. You've already heard a lot, and I am sure you will also enjoy part of it throughout these days. It is both a pleasure and an honor for me to inaugurate officially the sessions today. Allow me to say just a few words, but very profoundly, to congratulate Gazeta Wyborcza and to the Gazeta Wyborcza Foundation on receiving the Golden Pen of Freedom, the most prestigious Prize worldwide in journalism. This is a well-deserved recognition for their effort and struggle to defend freedom of press in the face of its worst threats and woes: pressure, persecution, propaganda. It's a longer list, as you know. It is also a praise to their constant contribution to uphold democracy throughout their 33-year endeavor and record of independent journalism. So in the names of Joanna and Piotr, my congratulations to all your colleagues, to all those who work with you and around you. And allow me as well to mention somebody that you know very well, and I have the privilege to know as well, Adam Michnik. But let me say, that we all know well the most fundamental prerequisite for free press is a broad and democratically guaranteed freedom of speech. Therefore, your tenacious defense of these freedoms are a powerful benchmark and guide for all of us, just as tenacious as its founder, former director and today editor-in-chief, Adam Michnik, who, by the way, will receive next month the 2022 Princess of Asturias Award for Communication and Humanities. Not surprisingly, the jury argues its decisions precisely on his commitment to quality journalism and to the defense of human rights and democratic values. A truly enlightened example of how to respond ethically to authoritarian threats. Please pass on my congratulations to Mr. Michnik, and let him know that I am very much looking forward to seeing him in Oviedo. Desde hace varias décadas, pero de una manera especial en los últimos tiempos, y como bien sabéis y se ha reflejado en esta sesión, los medios de comunicación han vivido una constante adaptación a los tiempos acelerados, a los ritmos de la tecnología, la transformación digital y sus formas de acceso a la información. A esta revolución se han sumado la envergadura y la gravedad de los acontecimientos que han tenido lugar más recientemente en Europa y en todo el mundo, que necesariamente exigen ser tratados con todo rigor y el máximo respeto a la verdad. Después de haber vivido la crisis financiera, el Brexit, una pandemia global, y de constatar con temor el regreso de la guerra a Europa con la agresión a Ucrania, estamos atravesando en general una etapa de aceleración, de vértigo, de polarización e incertidumbre que impacta claramente sobre la transformación política, económica y social en muchos de nuestros países. Y vaya desde aquí mi reconocimiento a todos los periodistas, reporteros, editores, hombres y mujeres que bajo condiciones muy difíciles, dramáticas de seguridad y de acceso a la información, nos relatan, nos retratan lo que ocurre en Ucrania. Y lo hacen de la mejor manera posible. También muchos lo intentan hacer desde Rusia y de ellos nos acordamos. Y por ello, más que nunca, se necesitan unos medios de comunicación independientes y responsables, centrados en el análisis y que exijan la mayor capacidad crítica por parte de sus profesionales, para servir en definitiva a los ciudadanos, para serles útiles y relevantes en la conducción de sus vidas, también para su mejor convivencia en el espacio público y el buen funcionamiento de las instituciones.
Este contexto invita, no cabe duda, a una reflexión profunda sobre el ineludible papel que los editores y periodistas desempeñáis en las sociedades en las que trabajáis y la alta responsabilidad que os corresponde ejercer. Por ello, este 73 Congreso de la WAN-IFRA vuelve a ser un foro necesario, casi acuciante, en el que debatir cuestiones tan relevantes como la situación actual de la libertad de prensa, la sostenibilidad de los medios de comunicación o el necesario esfuerzo por seguir innovando en esa difusión de la información, siempre desde la máxima responsabilidad. Es un honor que Zaragoza, que Aragón, España, acojan este Congreso Mundial de Medios de Comunicación por primera vez y que podamos hacerlo posible, felizmente, de forma presencial, tras esa larga pandemia que todavía no ha dejado de estar presente entre nosotros. En él se dan cita cada año grandes referentes en el ámbito de la gestión de medios de enorme impacto global. Y en esta edición, más de 700 medios, más de 80 países e investigadores de reconocido prestigio. Agradecemos a sus organizadores, a la WAN-IFRA, la Asociación Mundial, al Grupo Eneo y a Fernando de Yarza, particularmente, presidente de ambos, la elección de Zaragoza para la celebración de este encuentro. No les va a defraudar. Señoras y señores, la libertad de información, consagrada en la Constitución española en su artículo 20, reconoce y protege los derechos a comunicar o recibir libremente información veraz por cualquier medio de difusión. Y es una cita. Representa la concreción de un fundamento nuclear en cualquier democracia que se considera plena. España es hoy un buen exponente de esa libertad, pero como en todas las sociedades, exige esfuerzos constantes y permanentes. Las redacciones y medios de comunicación están repletos de profesionales que sitúan su vocación y oficio al servicio de los ciudadanos. Profesionales que creen profundamente en que con su trabajo diario fortalecen las instituciones y la democracia, siempre que lo hagan en libertad. Por eso, las falsedades, la simplificación, la desinformación son algunas de esas herramientas que existen para erosionar ese derecho a la información y que constituyen serias amenazas sobre nuestras sociedades. Los grandes temas que hoy definen la actualidad exigen especialmente una información contrastada y veraz, así como el compromiso deontológico de todos los periodistas y editores implicados en este proceso comunicativo, sea cual sea su soporte. Los periodistas sois el enlace entre los ciudadanos y los hechos, de los más cercanos y también de aquellos que resultan más ajenos. Esa vocación implica, en numerosos casos, asumir riesgos terribles en muchos lugares del mundo. Todavía hoy hay quien realmente, como se ha recordado tanto hoy, se juega la vida por informar, por fotografiar, por escribir o por respaldar las opiniones que se vierten en vuestros medios. A los periodistas os agradecemos el coraje y el tesón, a vuestros medios y editores que faciliten el espacio para difundir lo que es realmente de interés público y relevante. Durante 2 días pasarán por este foro responsables de los grupos y medios de comunicación más importantes del mundo, diarios, agencias, canales de televisión, plataformas de periodismo digital. Entre todos seguiréis construyendo el relato del momento, un puzzle que compondrá la actualidad fugaz de nuestro presente. También depende de vuestra labor el pozo que quede y que nos pueda ayudar a todos a avanzar con más solidez y con más seguridad. Formáis parte de un sector que debe mantenerse siempre a la vanguardia de la tecnología, pero sin olvidar los valores fundamentales que vertebraron siempre esta profesión: la verdad, el rigor, la independencia y el compromiso con la sociedad. Muchas gracias a todos, que disfruten de este congreso aquí en Zaragoza, en Aragón, y que vuelvan siempre que sea posible. Seguro que esta tierra les va a dejar una memoria imperecedera. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Su Majestad. Con estos tres mensajes, últimos mensajes cargados de emoción, de muchísima fuerza, me han encantado sus palabras. Cerramos. We would like to invite you to the special reception with Your Majesty the King. Afterwards, you have a bus shuttle taking you to the Alfajería Palace. Enjoy the evening. Thank you so much. Mañana más si quieren. Gracias y muy buenas noches.